It's so nice. It's so good to see all these faces. I think we're going to have a really rocking and rolling next 45 minutes because my guess is that all of us are in deep love with XR and 3D technologies and this new world that we're all embarking in. My name is Adaora Udoji. I'm the Director of Corporate Innovation and Entrepreneurship Programs at RLab. RLab is a nonprofit organization based in New York City, funded by the City of New York, the New York Economic Development Corporation, and run by NYU as part of a consortium of universities, including Columbia University, CUNY, and the New School. Our whole purpose in life, mine as the Director of Innovation, and my dear colleague, Elena Parker, who is the Manager of Marketing and Communications, our whole mission in life is to drive and support the expansion of XR applications and the scaling of them. And we all know one of the critical components of that is making sure that talent has the skill to help develop these applications as well as build them, and that corporations understand where that talent is, and talent understands what those corporate needs are, or startup needs are, or other entities in the marketplace. I am so excited and really incredibly thrilled to be here with some people who I respect beyond measure. First of all, I would be absolutely remiss if not to give the greatest thanks to Joanna Popper and Cortney Harding. Cortney, can you put your last name in there? I just see Cortney. But Joanna Popper actually launched this whole initiative where she decided one day, and I'm gonna let her talk about it more, but that there was a need to create some transparency and to connect people to the industry so that we can all start understanding what it takes to become an integral part of this new world that is very early days, very early days. RLab has been around for about 1.5 years. And in that time, we've had thousands of people come through our doors. We support startups. We have startup programs. We have education and training programs like masterclasses in volumetric and 3D real-time rendering. And we also work with corporations so that they can do some rapid prototyping and understand what these technologies look like. Very quickly, my background, I sat at many seats at this table. I'm an angel investor. I'm a maker. I've made VR with the likes of Google. I've worked on huge projects in AI with IBM and others. I spent many years as a journalist in broadcast, so visual technology was something that I grew up with over many years, and now have spent the last 7 or 8 years working in the startup world and working with corporations and investors, working in venture capital, for example, working with teams who are thinking about this new technology and how to apply it. So enough about me. I'm gonna allow Joanna Popper, who works at HP, among many other things, and then Alon Grinshpoon, who is our poster child at RLab, around how to create an ecosystem to build a company. He has a startup that is flourishing around AR cloud processing and creating digital tools. He'll talk more about that. Cortney Harding has been in this very early also. She makes all sorts of products and she does a lot of work with the consulting companies, particularly PwC right now, but has worked with many corporations and individuals. And Chris Horne, another, I like to call them, they're all sort of original gangsters in this new modern incarnation of where we are with this new technology. And he's had many seats at the table also. So Joanna, I'm gonna start with you since this was your idea around office hours. And just to end on a note, we will continue to do these at least once a month for the next couple of months. And given the demand, we might likely actually do it twice a month. We capped it at 50 this time on purpose because we wanted to be able to see all of your faces. And we wanted to have like somewhat of a real conversation. I would ask all of you to keep your cameras on so that we can actually see your faces. Otherwise, next time we'll just open it up to everyone. And in addition to that, if you could just be on mute, but we fully expect and want you to ask questions at any point at all during these conversations. Feel free to put it in the chat or feel free to sort of jump in. It may be a little chaotic, but we're trying to find our way. But we really are trying to build community. So with that all said, Joanna, take it away, my love.
Sure. So I'll do two things. I'll introduce myself and then I'll introduce why why we started this initiative up. So my name is Joanna Popper. I've been at HP about 2.5 years now, leading out our initiative for virtual reality for go-to-market. And I was focused on location-based entertainment when I first joined. Prior to HP, I was leading media and marketing at Singularity University in Silicon Valley for a little bit. And I was at NBC Universal leading marketing for the brand Telemundo for nearly a decade. Like Adaora, though, I also, those are the careers I point to as like, you know, helping pave the way into what we're doing today in immersive computing and VR. But prior to that, I actually was a McKinsey consultant at another marketing job, and I started my career in Wall Street. So that was my original background. So the reason that I, you know, kind of wanted to do something in this realm of connecting people with jobs and information was a couple of things. One, obviously we're in, you know, I think most people in this are in the United States, but, you know, so the numbers I'm going to talk about are for the United States, but you know, we may have international people, but certainly we're in an uncharted, unprecedented, you know, territory in terms of the economy right now in the United States. I think it was something like 20 million people were unemployed when we started talking about this. Now I think it's 16. So at least the numbers, I guess, are maybe sort of going in the right direction, but still, you know, unthinkable, you know, unemployment numbers, not to mention underemployment and you know, all of that. Plus, there just seemed to, you know, I saw a number of posts on social media, basically with the sentiment of, it's hard to get jobs in this industry. It's hard to understand how to get jobs in this industry. It's particularly hard if maybe you don't live in one of 3 cities, those cities being San Francisco, LA, and Seattle. And if you, I mean, the specific messages were like, if you're not a white man with an Ivy League degree living in these 3 cities, forget it. And so that just, that like as a concept bummed me out, since what we're doing here is we're building the next wave of computing. We're building the next wave, you know, the next wave of technology, you know, how we're going to be connected of media and entertainment and everything. And so I believe really deeply in the impact that technology and media have on all of us and on how we see the world, how we see our role in the world, and how we interact, how we connect. And so don't want this wave of computing to be limited to, you know, a small subset of people getting to decide how this wave of computing goes for all of us. And so thought it was important to have more transparency, more representation in the industry over, I mean, that's one of the reasons I work in the industry and one of the things I deeply believe. And then so when I saw these messages, particularly at this, you know, this tough time, you know, just wanted to create some help. And so the first thing I did was I just offered to do Zoom calls with a couple people. Those got booked up in like a matter of minutes. And then I booked out a group Zoom call with with somebody with Steve Lucas and Mariana Acuna. 60 people showed up at that. That was actually on a holiday, and we kind of announced it, you know, just like 12 hours before. And then we did a Twitter hashtag so people could ask us all questions. We had about the reverse, because what we saw in the Zoom call was we had too many people asking questions and not enough people answering. And so then on the Twitter, Ask Me Anything, we had 60 different people answering questions as well, you know, from every different background. So anyway, the real purpose here is to get your questions answered, to point you in directions, you know, make things clearer, to give you ideas. It's not necessarily like, you know, here's a job, have it, but it's more like, you know, help you on your journey of what's next for you. But also bear in mind, everyone who gives their experience is just giving their experience. It's not going to, you know, not all advice is going to be applicable to you. So you have to kind of discern what makes the most sense and follow your own path. But we're here to be accessible and support.
All right, Joanna, thank you. Alon?
Hi, everyone. I'm founder and CEO of a company called echoXR, one of the companies who went through the RLab entrepreneurial programs. We later secured investments from Techstars, and literally before COVID hit, secured a $1 million seed round. We are building a cloud platform for 3D, basically providing tools and server-side infrastructure for developers who want to build AR/VR applications. And already have over 2,500 developers on the platform. We create XR jobs. I mean, we hired AR/VR engineers from Columbia. We had so far for our company's journey over 28 business development and software development interns from NYU, Columbia, Fordham, CUNY. A lot of it thanks through RLab. I guess thank you so much for, you know, bringing this together, and thank you, Joanna, Cortney, for starting this movement to bring more and more people into the XR space.
So Alon is a computer scientist. As he said, he graduated from Columbia. I think it's important.
Certified nerd, yep.
Yeah, that you started this company 2.5 years ago, and how many developers are currently on it and using it or actively?
So we already have 2,500 developers on the platform. We just passed that milestone, was it last week? And we're growing. I mean, this is the time for XR. People specifically right now are sitting in front of their computer. They're at home. This is the time to build. And for us as a company, we're selling like tools and network infrastructure specifically for XR. This is exactly where we want our users to be, right? In front of a computer, sitting there, waiting to build. So I think it's a really exciting time. And as Joanna mentioned, like this is the time to find a job in XR because this is the time for this space.
So Alon, you started with yourself. You were one person.
Yeah.
And so how many employees and part-time workers are with you today?
Oh, so we're 6 full-time, and literally up until last week, we had like 20 interns from all the universities that I mentioned in New York. It's a phenomenal way for everyone to get into that space. So for example, you have all these XR companies looking for interns over the summer, over the fall. We're literally recruiting now for our next class. And one of the cool thing about an XR internship, and maybe even specifically in our company, but I know that's the fact for other companies as well, we run a lot of workshops on our space. So it's the history of AR, VR, the how to build a startup, how to code in Unity and Unreal, all these different game engines for 3D. So if you're a up and rising kind of student or like trying to get into XR space, take an internship at a startup company. You'll learn so much. And because again, now is the time to build, I think you're going to get a lot of it just to learn about what's going on in that space. And there's so much innovation going on. Again, this is the time for look for an XR job.
Awesome, thank you, Alon. Cortney, let's hear about your really interesting route into building XR products today for major corporations and entities.
Yeah, so I'm Cortney Harding. This is my dog. She's also my company's mascot. She just came into my room, so I thought I'd say hi to her for a second before I put her back down. Anyway, so it's always good to have a dog on the call at some point. So yeah, I'm Cortney. I have been working in XR for about 4 years. I started, actually, I got a job. I worked at a company called Moth and Flame, which is a fantastic VR production company. They've done amazing work. So I was employee number 3 there. I did biz dev and strategy for them and loved working with them. We did some really cool projects for some pretty big brands. And then I decided to take the jump and start Friends with Holograms, which is my agency, about 3 years ago now, 2.5, 3 years ago. And yeah, so we built for a lot of like pretty big companies. So our first, and I'd say arguably biggest project to date was with Accenture. So we've done some work with them around like child welfare. That's an amazing piece that I'm really super proud of. We've worked with a company called BDI to do.
But hold on, before you get to the BDI, I think Cortney has created one of the best training modules that I've seen, and I've seen hundreds of them, where she created this interactive experience for social workers. And so it was 360 video with a bunch of digital inserts. And it was also voice activated. So you're literally in someone's house, you know, as social workers do when there's been a complaint of like child abuse. And you're in the house and you're having conversations with these very defensive parents. And it's incredible. I mean, you literally feel like you're in this house, you look around, it's a big disaster, and you're talking to these people who are very hostile and they're right across from you. And you're given voice commands of things in terms of training of how you might react in that environment. And it's really, and literally I've seen hundreds of these, and hers is by far the best, the work that she did with Rory DeBoeuf at Accenture.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Yeah, it's a piece that we're incredibly proud of. It's had an incredible shelf life. My favorite thing about that piece is, so the state of Indiana started using it, and within 6 months, they saw an 18% decrease in caseworker turnover. And the guy who's their CIO actually just like won another award in Indiana because he was using it. So it was really amazing to work on. So we've done that. We worked with a company called BDI to do training around workplace inclusion. So we worked with Gabo Aurora to direct that. If folks don't know who he is, you should. His work is incredible. He's done like New York Times, and
put his name into the chat. I mean, just so that they can look him up.
Yeah. He's. I'll put his name in. I'll put the director of the Accenture piece in as well, because he also does amazing work. So yeah, we've worked with Walmart. Right now I'm working with PwC on a pretty big project. done consulting for Verizon. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely worked with a lot of big companies. We try to also do as much sort of on the social good side. So we've got a couple of projects in progress right now that are more like festival projects, social good projects. So we work on that as well. And we have a project with NYU that kicks off. I'm waiting for the contract to get signed and come back to me. So hopefully it kicks off next week. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And Chris, you want to tell us about all your extraordinary work and how you think about where we're going?
Yeah, I've bounced around a lot. So I originally started at Pixar, and someone had smuggled in one of those prototype Oculus Dev Kit 2s way back in the day. I put it on within 10 seconds. I was like, I'm quitting my job. This is way cooler than anything I'm doing right now. So I was the first employee at this tiny little startup that got acqui-hired by Oculus to become their film studio. So if you've heard of Oculus Story Studio, or have you seen Lost, Henry, Dear Angelica, or Played with Quill, I was very involved in all four of those. I moved over.
Hold on, Chris. And if you haven't seen those, you should, just in terms of the quality of either the experience and or the narrative storytelling and or the nature of the technology, right? The hardware and the software. You can access all of those with Quests. You can go to the Oculus store. I mean, there's some beautiful and eternal, right? I mean, Henry and Dear Angelica, I mean, they persist in terms of the best in class around storytelling and experiences in VR. I would argue that. I think there's an excellent argument. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm biased. I think so, but
it's true.
You know.
Don't you think, Joanna, Cortney, you guys have seen these. I don't know if you have, Alon, but they're premier quality VR experiences.
Yeah, Henry is my favorite of all of those. They're all incredible. You should go check them all out. Henry is my favorite. It's a really beautiful story, and it's for kids. So if you want to introduce younger people in your life to VR, that's like the perfect thing to show them. Although I really like it too, so it's good for all ages.
I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, it's fine. So yeah, I worked on those, moved over to Facebook, where I was an engineering manager on Facebook Spaces, which then turned into Facebook Horizon, which is kind of it hasn't come out yet. It's still in development, but it's kind of their metaverse. They're shot on the metaverse, or Oasis. So I worked on that, and then I started my own company. Did that for 1.5 years. It was almost like TikTok for AR avatars. Did freelance for about 6 months doing face filters for a bunch of Fortune 1000 companies. And then recently I've just started my new company, and not ready to talk about it yet. Got like a demo and some fundraising. So I'm in that world right now.
All right. So you can see we have a really varied panel who are coming at these XR, VR, AR universes in a variety of different ways. And I think it's worth, before we start diving into your questions, and please feel free to drop your questions into the chat and or raise your hand and we'll call on you. But I think it's also worth saying that this is such early days. I often liken so much of this technology to a human being that if the average age is 75, we're probably at the age of 2. People have some idea that somehow AI is a fully formed technology. It's not, or robotics or VR or AR. But there are some underlying technologies that I'm sure many people watching understand: computer visualization, advanced algorithms, machinery and robotics. And we're converging all of these things in a variety of different applications, right, across sectors. And there are real applications from healthcare to media to architecture to zoology. And the way that some researchers are mimicking natural environments and having those environments interact with each other in new and different ways, because you can control them digitally. So having said all that, I'm going to turn to some of the questions. Thank you to all of you who signed up and then put your questions forth, because we are really trying to be as helpful as we can. All right, so I'm just going to ask the panel right now, in what areas of XR do you see the most growth in the near future? That was a question that was submitted by one of the panelists here. If that was you, feel free to raise your hand. But Joanna, Alon, Cortney, Chris, anybody jump in? I mean, where do you think the growth, well, actually, I'm going to start with you, Cortney. Where do you see the growth working with consultants who are working with all sorts of Fortune 500 companies? And Joanna, you do too. You work with a lot of different Fortune 500 companies, and I guess all of you do. So actually, jump in.
So I'll jump in. So it's training, absolutely. I think the big growth area is going to be training and education. That's where we've seen pretty much all of our business. So yeah, so if you're looking for an area to focus in, I would really recommend going towards training.
When you say training, like, can you be broader than that? I mean, what does training mean? Like, training for what?
Well, training for a lot of different things, right? So right now I'm working on a project that is training for people who work in data centers, how to do, you know, simple mechanical tasks. I also have a project that is training for people who work in grocery stores. So one thing that the pandemic has done is make a lot of what used to be sort of the normal way of doing training obsolete, because a lot of the time you would have somebody stand right next to you and show you how to do simple tasks. You can't do that if you're supposed to stay 6 feet apart. So, you know, anything as rudimentary as that to the training we did for the social workers, the training we've done around diversity and inclusion. So there's a ton. Medical training, huge, huge hot topic right now. A lot of great research into that, a lot of investment into that. I would say if that's your background or area of interest, that's a great direction to go in. Soft skills training, huge opportunities there. Hard skills training, huge opportunities. So yeah, I would say all different types of training are going to have some type of opportunity in XR.
I read an article last week from the Air Force that reported that they've launched a number of initiatives in virtual reality training and have done so and been very active in the space over many decades. And the report said that they were literally able to get pilots ready to fly certain planes in 6 months versus a year, and then save $60,000 on each pilot in training them for particular tasks over years. So we're starting to see some really encouraging quantitative as well as qualitative reports and studies showing the effectiveness of immersion applications compared to standard types of education and training programs. Joanna, Alon, Chris, where do you see the growth in the near term?
See, there's well, training is definitely, so there's I would say 5 different buckets that we've been focused on. Training is one of them. Architecture, engineering, construction, and product dev. In terms of industries, healthcare, higher education, and then media and entertainment. And the main, those are the industry or use case buckets. The use cases are using VR to learn, to create, to collaborate, and to connect. And then specifically right now, some of the areas that we're seeing with the most interest, you know, in the current environment and the most growth right now is gaming, of course, anything social VR or remote collaboration, and then anything around learning that can be either sort of an enterprise training for, you know, while 25 to 30% of workers are expected to be remote through 2021, or, you know, at least part of the time. And then education, where we have about 90% of the students are not physically in school. And so you have educators and, you know, worldwide looking for new and ways to keep engaging their students. And then, you know, I mentioned gaming and social VR at the top. We see stats that, you know, many of the social VR apps, like say VR chat is hitting their all-time highs for concurrent users. We see Steam VR at their all-time concurrent highs as well. You know, some of that was pushed specifically by Half-Life Alyx in March, but the numbers haven't, you know, now we're already in August and those numbers have not dropped at all. So those are some of the areas that we're seeing a lot of growth in on the virtual reality side.
Yeah,
Joanna, can you drop the Half-Life Alyx into the chat? So some of these things that we're referring to, like, I don't even know what that is. And this is what I live and breathe.
Half-Life Alyx?
So
it's a really cool game.
Yeah. But if we drop some of those things in so that people can, like, go check them out, that would be great. I'm sorry, Alon, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I just wanted to piggyback on something that Joanna said. Literally right now, obviously, remote work is one of the biggest use cases for immersive technology. We see companies like Spatial, they're a New York-based company, and Immersed, which is a Techstars company that raised, I think, like $2 million in 2 days on like a crowdfunding campaign to provide Oculus Quest with this remote work solution. Again, like right now, everyone is forced to work remotely. Everyone is looking at what we're doing right now, Zoom or like video calling, as the new normal. And right now, you're obviously trying to figure out what's the next thing. So now we are talking, everyone, like we're talking together in 2D. Obviously, 3D is the next big thing. And now is the time to build some applications like that. And when you see headsets being sold everywhere on the planet, Oculus Quest is being literally sold every holiday season, every Black Friday, it's sold out. Companies like HP obviously creating the Reverb, like amazing headsets for everyone. So this is the time to build solutions like that, to use the potential of these commercially ready headsets that are pretty cheap. Like, if you think about it, it's like the price of a console. So if you're thinking of buying like a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 5 or an Oculus Quest, you might be lucking out and just buying an Oculus Quest.
Chris, what are you thinking in terms of the short term and what your fellow panelists have spoken about?
I think there's an interesting inflection point coming up this Christmas. So Quest is going to sell out, and they've been stockpiling like crazy. Right. And so I think we're actually going to hit finally critical mass in the market to actually support an ecosystem, like a consumer side ecosystem that's not just enterprise. The other big thing I'm seeing is face filters have really, really taken off, and learning that skill is extremely valuable. But finding clients, finding people is actually really hard. There's nobody connecting the dots. So navigating that is really difficult.
Chris, except for us and Joanna, this is why we're here, right? This is why everyone's sitting here and taking an hour out of their day, which is, time is priceless. So here we are.
Yep. But I think face filters have really gone kind of parabolic since January. And I see those as the two major opportunities on the consumer side.
So there's a bunch of different levels. I just want to pause at this, and I'm going to get to some of the questions that people have just put into the chat. There are technical roles. There are product management roles. There are marketing roles. And there are sort of business management roles. And for example, I'm going to give you a couple right now, and I'll put them into the chat as our panelists continue to speak. One of the real challenges that we have, to Chris's point, and I'm going to ask you to follow up after I finish these couple of thoughts, but there isn't universal language around what these roles look like. Let's look at a metaphor. 10 years ago, most companies didn't have a social media team. I mean, what the heck was that? Why would Goldman Sachs have one? Or why would Kraft have one? There wasn't a sense of like, what is the value to me as a business or to me as an entrepreneur to be building out a business to help support this infrastructure of this new world they're calling social media. Instagram didn't even exist 10 years ago. Neither did TikTok. Facebook had just barely started. But today, nearly everyone has, right? Because there is this parallel world called the internet, and it is a digital world. And now we have increasing tools where we can make things in that digital world. So it's about virtual reality, it's about augmented reality, but it's also about this ability, as Alon pointed out, to develop these 3D digital assets that we can place in the world where we don't need a headset, right? We can use this. We're still dependent on some sort of screen, but there are also all sorts of plans for the Internet of Things where your watch or your earpod or your glasses are going to be projecting some sort of digital images around us. And that's what we call spatial computing, right? We can place these digital things in the world around us somewhere. So in thinking about what these jobs are, we saw a job today, for example, at Verizon for a business manager for an edge computing department. So you don't have to be a technologist for many of these jobs. Many of these teams are being built with technologists as well as subject matter experts, because a coder can't tell a brain surgeon how to do brain surgery. That's just not going to happen. They have different skills. They come together. They build a tool like MetaVise, which is a New York City-based company that was founded by a brain surgeon and a radiologist, and they have a fantastic tech team. But they're one of the few companies to get FDA approval for surgeons to use in preparation for surgery. And I've heard the brain surgeon, Osama, talk about how on Monday mornings, he now has 100% more information with his AR tool than he did before. And I think we would all agree that we want our brain surgeons to have 100% more information before they crack your skull open and start surgery on your brain. We want that. And so there's a lot of this cross-pollinating that has to happen. So for those of you on the call who are not necessarily technologists, there is a place for you in this world. And it's a question of paying attention to some of the details and how some of these job descriptions are written. I'll put the links in there now, but Chris, talk to us about how you've been finding those people who are building the tools and who are thinking about this new technology in significant and material ways.
Well, I wanted to curtail just a little bit there. at Story Studio, we actually had people from film, TV, games, theater, and tech and architecture all on the same roof, and it was like only 40 people. So like your background, it doesn't really matter where you come from. Like there is some skill that you can bring to it. As far as finding people who are building this stuff, I honestly, for me, it's Twitter. I'm like all up on VR, AR Twitter. People post their just amazing stuff on a regular basis, and they post their source code, and you can learn from them.
So how do you find those people on Twitter, Chris? Because it's not so easy.
It isn't. I should probably post just like, I'll like comb through and then post all the people that I think do amazing work. That's probably the most valuable. And then just like shout out other people. But
can you send that to us? Because we'll be happy to send that out in our newsletter and to create a sort of job bank that we think we're going to create. Right, Elena? Go ahead, Chris.
Oh yeah, so I'll forward that. But that's actually where I find the most interesting stuff, because it's just people at home trying out ideas and posting them online, and people interacting at a super like one-to-one natural level.
Okay, and what about you, Joanna? I mean, you've done a lot of research around a variety of different jobs. And so I've listed a bunch of things that we pulled like in the last couple days, but I mean, you did a really monstrously fantastic list of 25 companies who are hiring. Do you want to talk about
60? It's 60.
Oh, 60 companies.
We can post that article. Yeah, I put together a list of, it's on my LinkedIn, but I'll post it in a second. A list of questions that we've got from people, some of the jobs that are that are being hired for, some of the companies that are 60 companies that are all hiring at least as of August. What else was in there? It included some skills that you need and lots of types of events and online events that you can attend during this time period to keep learning, and then some podcasts and good books to read to continue your learning too, whether you're new in the industry or you're already in the industry and just looking to further accelerate and grow your career.
And there's thanks for that. And these are all, we're trying to aggregate these resources in some sort of real way. I mean, a couple of other places to look is our newsletter, rlab.nyc. If you see jobs, feel free to send them to us, or feel free to check them out and see if there's a job that might be relevant for you. We're trying to build that out more specifically. Nextreality.com can be a good source of just understanding what companies are doing what in the industry. Inside XR can be a really good source. Road to VR also. I mean, these are all sort of specifically focused on XR news and information. So those are particular places that you could check out. Alon, there's a question in here asking about, from Mark Steelman, asking, what advice do you have for those who are looking for co-founders or trying to start their own XR company? You were at it a couple times. You want to talk about your first company briefly, and then how you ended up on echoXR?
Yeah, so first of all, Mark, great question. So the first thing I did was right after Columbia, we were talking about surgery over there, but like the third thing I focused on was AR for vascular interventions, for basically using the HoloLens in a operative environment, and that was amazing. I personally scrubbed into like 20 surgeries where the doctor would wear the HoloLens. I would scrub in, stream 3D models to that headset, and they would perform the surgery in real time. It was like unbelievable experience, and really shows how AR can revolutionize something like surgery. But the problem was there is I had to do something I really, really hate, and that's waking up early in the morning. I had to go to the hospital at like 6 a.m., swap out 3D models, and that seemed really unscalable in that regard. Like if we wanted to work instead of Columbia Medical was Chicago Med, I have to fly out to Chicago every morning to like swap out 3D models. Obviously not, and that's what basically moved me into creating echoXR, which is that cloud platform that allows you to stream data remotely, that it doesn't matter if it's for surgery or healthcare or data visualization or games, you're able to stream data remotely and able to scale your application. And one of the things that, going back to Mark's question, that this is the why, like, and this is the reason you want to start a startup. You find a problem that you have it, and then you start validating with other people that this is not just your problem, but it exists in other spaces. And that's the like 101 of entrepreneurship. But in order to found co-founders, look, the entrepreneur ecosystem in New York is unbelievable. Like there's so many people here that are looking to build startups, that are looking to build companies, and the human capital is here. You have all these events by RLab, obviously, but also Techstars New York. So definitely plug yourself into all of these events. You're going to find amazing people there, like-minded people who want to build companies. And that is one way to get co-founders. Another way is through universities. So there's so many people in research labs doing AR, VR. I know personally people at Columbia, for example, and all they want to do is like start their own company. So plug yourself into those communities. There's newsletters, Columbia Entrepreneurship is one. NYU has another community like that. And you can find really quality people who are really aching to build things in AR, VR, and you can help them out as well.
Thank you. I would also add meetups to that wherever you are. I mean, this is the thing at this point. You don't have to be based in any particular location, and that's absolutely true also for companies that are hiring. There's less emphasis on where you are geographically and what that means. Let's go on to a question from Roy. Why are we not seeing more XR content? I think this could be a Cortney and Joanna and Chris question, actually. Why are we not seeing more XR content from major media companies, news, sports, film, TV? It seems this would be a natural fit, but we should be seeing more media content by now. Take it away, people. It's a good question.
So I think the market's just not there yet, like in terms of people having access to headsets. I am shocked that there's not more AR content out there, especially like phone-based AR. I think that is a really huge miss for a lot of companies. I think they just don't get it. I've seen a lot of attempts at it, and the creative hasn't been maybe what it should be. They don't understand how to do creative around it. So that does surprise me that AR, especially phone-based AR, has not been more widely embraced by sort of mainstream companies. But yeah, I mean, there was a big wave maybe 3 years ago where every entertainment company was all of a sudden doing VR, and they all had VR departments, and they spun it up. And most of those have shut down, because again, like the market's not far enough along, right? As soon as we start getting more and more headsets, and that's why I'm so bullish on training being the way in, because people will have headsets at work. They'll start liking the headsets, they'll start realizing the possibilities, and then you get to the point where people are like, oh, I need one of these at home, right? So I think that that's further down the horizon. Like we're going to see it eventually. But yeah, it's still kind of early.
I think it's worth like taking a chunk of the variety of different types of content though, right? And maybe Chris, you can speak to this, but there's augmented reality, there's mixed reality, there's extended reality, and then there's virtual reality. The reality is, I'm assuming that the vast majority of you on this call right now have a smartphone. And in your smartphone, I'd be shocked if not everyone has used a filter. That is technically augmented reality, right? So that exists right now today, and it's very widespread. There are billions of people. We had a company, Poplar, in one of our RLab accelerators. It's a British-based company. They provide a two-sided marketplace for filters and other AR. They, in the middle of COVID, raised $3 million. In the middle of COVID, they raised $3 million. And I mean, they've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. And they just acquired a New York City company called Surfer, SVRF, which was founded by one of the most brilliant women I know in XR, Sophia Dominguez, who I worked with many years ago. The point is, if you go to Surfer, it is a database of 3D images and other digital assets. It's basically a search engine for that online, 360 video and other things. And there's some basic tools. It's worth checking out, Surfer. The point is that exists today on the consumer side. And so I think it's really worth noting that there's a big distinction between the enterprise use of VR, AR, XR, MR, and the consumer use. And the consumer use is much more primitive, and it's really focused around those digital filters. And then there are many millions of people who have headsets, but that's not billions of people, right? And then on the enterprise side with the training, there are definitely tens of hundreds of thousands of headsets that are globally in the market being used for training purposes. So Chris, did you want to speak to that question about content?
Yeah, I think a lot of that content's actually still internal. So, you know, take Disney, for example. They have a bunch of different content arms. A lot of those content arms are actually building prototypes and small pieces of entertainment, but they're not actually releasing them. So they're trying to build up kind of the internal knowledge to be able to actually produce something that's worth pushing out. And I think that's kind of the tough part that we're in, is there's a lag time between this is a really, really good idea and here's something that you can actually use at home that's worthwhile. To point to something where, like, you know, blockchain, people are like, what is this? Why do you use it? Like, it's a really good idea. It was hot like 2 years ago and I still haven't seen it. And it's one of those things, there's a lag time there where people have to understand the knowledge, build the infrastructure, and then you can actually start getting some consumer apps out there.
I think that's right. And it's complicated, but I think I don't know if for many of you, you saw, for example, Beyonce's Black is King, or you watch The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. They're really pushing the envelope, and that's not VR or XR per se, but that is developed through a process called virtual production. And this is the next generation of the way that we're going to develop content. And there are a variety of software and hardware. I mean, for example, the Mandalorian, 85% of it was shot in front of these LED screens that can mimic any sorts of environments. And Chris, maybe I'm gonna let you speak to the virtual production, and also Joanna. But this idea that you can control your environment is significant in radical ways of changing how we create content in Hollywood, all the way through to advertising, actually. Chris, do you want to talk about virtual production for a second?
Yeah, I mean, I think The Mandalorian is the very, very tip of a huge change of how Hollywood actually creates content. Because instead of having a huge, you know, multi-hundred people and flying them out to some remote location, you just send a small team that can 3D scan the thing and you bring it back. So it's like understanding anything in that kind of the 3D scan pipeline, or even just being an on-set operator for these giant LED screens. Like, that's all useful, interesting stuff that's only going to grow in the future.
So you see a lot of digital additions to even flatties, as we call them, right? Or 2D productions. I think Black is King is a really good example of one of the more sophisticated, latest ones, that they're subtle and then more extreme digital tools that they use to enhance the experience of the video that they created. I'm going to move to Brandon. Hi, Brandon Powers, who asked, what is the best way to put yourself out there as a consultant? And Cortney, you can speak to that. How can I connect with larger companies or brands that could use my skills as an XR theater dance maker? Thanks. He's an expert around space and around theater and around merging live experiences with new technology. That's right, right? Brandon, you can unmute yourself. That's about right, right? Yeah.
Right. Hi.
You said I said it right? Okay. So who would like to respond to that way? How do you put yourself out there as a consultant? Chris, Joanne, Alon, Cortney?
So I mean, am still a consultant. So the first thing you have to do is define your value proposition. And, you know, I guess I would need to know, like, what big companies are you sort of referring to, and then what are you gonna do for them, right? So having this like awesome, interesting theater background is really cool, but you kind of need to be able to sell it to PwC or Accenture or Walmart, Coca-Cola, is like, well, I can take this background and help you do X. And the more that you tie it, and this is just kind of the nature of the beast, the more you tie it to like revenue or cost savings or any sort of like, if you use VR to do X, you will save Y amount of dollars. Like, that's a really strong proposition. You know, I think you just kind of have to network your way in. I mean, I got my initial project with Accenture because I knew Rory. She was someone my husband actually had worked with years ago. And so I knew her and she brought me in, and that sort of launched us. So again, you know, the more time you spend in this community meeting people, and I know it's really, really, really hard right now because everything's online and virtual, but eventually we're all going to get to see each other again. So the more time you spend building your community, that's where the opportunities are going to come from. It's going to be really, you're not going to see a ton of like job postings. You're just going to see a lot of people sort of introducing you and connecting with people, and that's how you kind of build it up. But yeah, I would say just have like a really, really strong value prop that is really tied to sort of like either cost creation, you know, cost savings or revenue generation, and that's going to get you in the door.
Joanna, do you have any thoughts on how to be an effective consultant in this space?
Well, I haven't really been a consultant. I did well, that's not true. Prior to joining HP, I did a relatively short stint doing some advisory and speaking and consulting, but it was relatively short. So probably not the best one to answer that. I've most of the time that I've been in this space, I've been working at large companies. But I guess the advice I would give.
Well, one thing that you do that I think is critical to being a consultant or even moving into this space, one thing I think Joanna, and everybody should follow her on LinkedIn if you're not, and also on Twitter.
It's for increasing followers.
You create content a lot. So things that you read, you share articles, you share your conversations with people, you share resources. I mean, that's one way to be identified as someone who's connected to the space and has some knowledge about some particular aspect of the industry that you can engage with other professionals, right?
I think one of the things I think like sort of demystifying working in XR is, the skill sets that you have in whatever industry you're in right now, if it's an adjacent industry or even not an adjacent industry, you're bringing to this industry the same as you would, if you were trying to work in CPG or, some other like more formal, or not more formal, but more mature industry. So, if you work in a legal department in your company, but you're really excited about new technology, you still have, you can take those skills, whether, legal, finance, marketing, business development, sales, there's opportunity. I'm probably missing, but some of those functional areas, even if you're not in a super technical role today, you can still take those functional areas and bring those to companies. Typically, companies that are a little bit more advanced or a little bit more mature that have already raised funding are more likely looking for those types of roles. Early stage might be looking for those as consultants or having people that they hire on, just as retainer to help them out. But the way I see startups typically start with the engineers and they build something, and then at some point once it's ready to be like a product, a real product, then they start getting maybe some couple salespeople or business development people on board to help them get the product to the market. And then only after a little later in the cycle, then they start staffing up on all of those types of roles that I just said. So you could potentially be a consultant / not full-time employee, helping an early stage startup with their strategy around sales or business development or product market fit. And so that's an opportunity. And then, if it's that you're looking for learning the technology in a deeper way and you want to be building, then, there's lots of classes for Unity and Unreal and other things that you can take to increase your skill set in those areas.
Yeah, that's 100%. And I would also add that I think that there are increasing numbers of types of classes. Some of it are even at RLab, for example, but there are other places that provide classes besides RLab. But even at RLab, we've started out highly technical, master classes for motion capture or volumetric or 3D real-time rendering. But we're definitely moving out where we're also going to be in the near future providing classes and workshops for managers in XR and strategies for executives in XR, thinking about what that means to be bringing on a team and the type of skill sets and the cost and how you integrate that into whatever business that you are working in. I want you to note that in the chat, Elena has been very kind to provide everyone's Twitter handles. And also she did provide Joanna's article. So there's a link there to her LinkedIn article that lists out some of the 60 companies. And to be clear, we're talking about companies from like 1-800-Flowers. I saw a job from them a couple of weeks ago. The tech companies it would not be surprising, but then there's a lot on Wall Street. Fidelity's been very active in this space. And so because you don't necessarily have the exact pedigree, I think what Joanna said is really important. Wherever company that you are now or whatever industry you have the most experience with, they're looking at some of these technologies and trying to figure out solutions. So maybe you're the person to help them navigate that. Nobody has all the answers. So it's important to keep that in mind. So I just wanted to point that out. We have time for one more question because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's 12:54. So very quickly, Chris, can you take this one? As a creative in the XR, AR specifically space, what skills should we focus on the most since so many disciplines are useful in this field? 3D modeling, rigging, coding, design, et cetera, to make finding a corporate job in this space a bit easier. This comes from Alexis. After Chris answers that, I'd like Joanna, Alon, and Cortney to think about the last parting bits of advice that you'd like to give to the 50 or so people who have joined us today. So Chris, what about that for XR? What do we need to be focusing on most?
I think 3D modeling, because you can't have any AR, XR, anything without a 3D model of some sort. So if you can model and shade it, that's extremely useful. I think we're going to have a huge talent crunch coming up as all of the tech companies really ramp up hiring and they need all of these assets and face filters take off, all that stuff. There's going to be a talent crunch. So that's super useful. And then always engineering. We cannot have enough engineers. If you know even just a little bit of programming, even if you're a designer that knows just a small amount of programming, it leaps off the page. That's extremely useful. And that goes for not only like large corporate teams, but also startups. So like startups, you're going to get your hands dirty in kind of everything. So knowing multiple skills is extremely useful. If you're a modeler that can light and do visual effects and stuff like that, like you're cool, you're hired, jump in and go do all of that stuff. And if you're on a large corporate team, like eventually something falls through the cracks and someone needs to be able to pick that up and run with it. Having those extra skills really, really helps a lot. And so we look for it when we're hiring.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have 4 minutes and running. Final thoughts from Joanna, Popper, Alon, Cortney, Chris, any final thoughts?
My final thought is that this is a new area that there's so much opportunity. There's, whatever your skill set, there's probably something that you can bring to the industry and add to the industry and help the industry grow and have, an outsized impact on this industry compared to, like a much more mature industry. So we're really glad to see everyone here and, excited about people's enthusiasm and working in this space. It's a group of people who have so many different backgrounds, from gaming to engineering to immersive theater to healthcare to psychology. It's really interesting when you hear a lot of the people's backstories and origin stories in XR, because it's such a fascinating group of people who are all here because of their sort of optimistic point of view of the world and their desire to have an impact and continue to build and create something amazing. So excited to see you all, and excited to see where you all end up and what you all end up building and creating in the industry.
Alon?
So my final thoughts are basically something that Adaora mentioned about the influx of users and face filters and mobile AR, basically. We see that so many people who are much younger than me using Snapchat and TikTok on a daily basis. And that's not going to change. I mean, this is the new normal. The camera is the new feed. And I think we cannot expect younger generations to suddenly graduate back to what we call like 2D interfaces like Twitter or Facebook, because they're so immersed in this either 3D, that like Fortnite, that you have like a 3D avatar. That's like some kind of sense of a metaverse. So I think it's just like our space will just going to grow and grow and grow. So this is definitely the time to, pun intended, get immersed in this space. So definitely consider a job in XR. I'm going to share a link to our job listings at echoXR if anyone is interested. We have non-technical and technical roles open, so definitely check that out. And thanks again, RLab, for inviting me to speak, and then for Joanna, Cortney, for like actually starting this movement. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Cortney.
So I would say the most important thing you can do right now, and I know it's really hard because you can't actually see that many people, is grow your network, because this is a really tight-knit community. And the more people you can talk to, I think everyone on this call is really approachable. I've found people in XR to be super approachable, and everyone's really excited. And so the more people follow people on Twitter, follow people on LinkedIn, like hit them up, start conversations. There's so many like free online events right now. I'm speaking at a bunch of them in the next month or so, and like those are really great. There's so many great resources out there, and there's so many really nice people out there. So the more time that you spend like connecting with people and building those relationships, the better positioned you're going to be when things open up.
Awesome. Chris?
My last words are make something and publish it. like just make little prototypes and put it out there. The bar is actually super low because it's such a new industry. So it's even dumb little prototypes will go viral within the community. And I have straight up hired people because I liked 2 of their prototypes. I was like, these are cool ideas. You should come join the team. It's really hard to find people that are just doing that like super basic thing of like making something, whether it's good, whether it's bad, you'll get feedback, you'll grow your network, more people will become interested. And then if you need a job, you just post out like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And at least one of those people will either connect you with someone else or they'll be hiring directly. And so I think that's super valuable.
I think that's right. And I think it's also, and my final thought is 2 things. One is, I think I ditto to what each of our esteemed panelists just said, but it's also make something if you're technical, but throw out your ideas if you're not technical. I mean, I think it was Roy who had the question about why is there not more XR in media? Okay, well, what's your idea of like what the media industry, whether it's news or entertainment or sports, could be doing with one of these things, right? And maybe that's a paragraph on your LinkedIn page. So I think getting the ideas out there, sharing those ideas, engaging with people in meetups, because those are still happening in the digital space. You came here, paying attention to some of those sources that I just sent to you, being aware of what's happening in the industry where you have the greatest expertise, and trying to work relationships that you already have, exposing them to these new ideas. Most executives, this is low on their list right now. They're trying to stay alive, right? And particularly in very hard hit industries like retail, real estate, media, entertainment, et cetera. I mean, industries are hurting, and maybe you're going to provide some solution or ideas way forward. You're not going to have the answers, but you might have some ideas that would be of value to them based on your interest in the technology as well as understanding the industry itself. We are definitely, this is the first of many XR office hours. We will next month. It will be the week of September 14th. We're hearing some rumors about a variety of different tech companies holding a variety of different events, so we haven't nailed down the particular day that week, but we will be, the next panel will be corporates who are hiring, who are going to be talking about who they're hiring, how they think about hiring, the specific skill sets that they're hiring for. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be experimenting with this format. I can't thank Joanna enough for her brilliant idea again, and Alon for his amazing work, and Cortney for his amazing work, and Chris for his extraordinary work, and also just for taking time out today to come and hang with all of us and have this conversation. We will wrap this up in some way, shape, or form, and you can find more information about this, right, Elena, in the coming days and weeks on our website and in our newsletter. And what do we say? Go forth and prosper in the world of XR. I'm sorry we didn't get to some of these questions. You can feel free to send us an email, Adaora@rlab.nyc. I promise you it will take me a minute to get back to you. But our intention is to, and I'm gonna give you Elena's email too. .nyc or Adaora@rlab.nyc. I hope this has been helpful to you guys in some way, shape, or form. And listen, we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thank
This has been great. And feel free, if people have additional questions, they can post them on Twitter with #XR jobs. And
yeah, better yet, don't email us. Yes, take your question. Thank you, Joanna. #XR jobs. Send it out there, and it will get responded to. Please do that. Yes.
Thanks for being here. Thank you for hosting this. This
Thank
is great.
you.
Thanks everyone for your time today.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.